Welcome to the Bleeding Hearts Club, where we alchemize pain into something beautiful together. I'm your co-host, Shroot. I'm an astrologer who uses astrology as a self-reflective tool for healing and growth. And this is my co-host.
Hi, y'all. My name is Stevie. I use they and she pronouns. I am a tarot reader, Reiki practitioner, and mental health provider.
I love it. So, in honor of Scorpio season, we're chatting resentment today. And as two Scorpio dominant people, we have much to say about this topic. So, I think we're going to go ahead and jump in, but you do have a horoscope to look forward to after this. So, first of all, what's your relationship to resentment, Stevie?
That is a great question. I definitely feel like my resentment is an intergenerational gift
Ooh.
in some ways. It really feels matrilineal, like deep female rage. Even as like a non-binary person, it definitely feels very motherly, uh, femininely, whatever. Yeah, I feel like my resentment is like a big volcano. Imagine a volcano erupting at the same time as a tornado is blowing through, and also there's like thunder and lightning.
I thought say
Like
lightning too, right? Yep.
that, that to me is what my resentment feels like. I don't think I necessarily express it outwardly. Obviously, it's going to come out as like being passive aggressive or whatever the hell I'm doing, to the people around me. But I think I really internalize it a lot and suppress it a lot because I've seen it outwardly expressed in my family. And that didn't feel good to witness or to be on the receiving end of. So I internalize it and it comes out in my dreams.
Ooh.
12th house Scorpio.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm gonna leave that there. I want to know what
Yeah. Oh,
yours is like.
I think in some ways mine's the opposite. I think mine is kind of like a really dense ball, like a really, really heavy, tiny, dark ball. And it's kind of rooted in my body, in my belly button. And mine is also extremely matrilineal. And again, being non-binary, it still feels very on that maternal side of things. And I think that I can pinpoint mine a little bit closer to the concept of like unmet needs. And that my resentment is definitely sourced in this idea that like my needs have been unmet, maybe my mother, my grandmother's, et cetera, the kind of unmet needs that have accumulated over the generations and been passed down. And so mine feels like there's a gravitational force around it and it's pulling you know, things in, and therefore that force of movement is consuming me. Like, so my resentment starts really small and really easy for me to ignore. And then before I know it, it's this like all consuming thing that is just like sucking in everything to like feed it almost. And so I tend to notice when my resentment is consuming me like after the fact. Like I tend to notice it a little late in the game. And the ways that I can kind of be tipped off that, hey, I'm like steeped in resentment right now, is that I can get really mean with my comments. And it's not typically meanness directed at the person in front of me. So I'm not necessarily saying mean things to hurt somebody in front of me, but I might be making really mean comments about somebody else who's not there. Or kind of like really sarcastic, but it's like taking sarcasm to that bitter place where it's like clearly it's like not funny, it's not lighthearted, like and so yeah, so like it just comes across like really bitchy and like really like I think I can come across callous and kind of cold-hearted, which I think I'm a Libra, I don't necessarily like to go there. And I'm not necessarily happy with the fact that I have that capacity. So I think like it's a side of me that only the people closest to me see. It's not something that I'm able to share easily outwardly. Like I definitely tend to put my happiest and my most excited to be here foot forward. But I think when I get close to somebody, that's when you start seeing my little bitchy comments come out. And I can be like sarcastic and funny, and then it's only when I'm taking it too far that I can look back and be like, hey, I think there's something under there you gotta unpack because that was a little much. That was a little too much. Where is that coming from? So I like to use it as an opportunity for self-reflection. Shocker, the self-reflective astrologer likes to use resentment as a point of reflection. But I definitely have grown to see it as an opportunity for understanding myself better and understanding like what is the unmet need that this resentment is covering and responding to. And so I feel less like discomfort around it and more almost like acceptance of like this is a it's almost like a sign that like I can, listen to it if I'm really paying attention. And so I try to view it from that lens as opposed to the fact that it's turning me into a person that I don't like. And that sometimes goes against my values and sometimes can be hurtful as a result. But um, you know, every day is a journey, trying to get better at catching it sooner and sooner. So yeah. Oh.
Yeah, that is so real. When you were saying that, like the resentment comes up when there's like an unmet need, it made me think of like what triggers my
Mm.
I was about to say abandonment,
Yeah.
uh subtle foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Um, what triggers my resentment, and it is abandonment. It is like this feeling that somebody who is supposed to care for me, I
Hmm.
wonder who that could be, and supposed to prioritize me in some way or to help me in some way, ends up prioritizing their own needs, their own, like, I don't know. The words like lofty desires are coming to mind, but like either way, like they are prioritizing what they want, regardless of the rest of the situation or the rest of the context, which includes me. I
Hmm.
am the context. Yeah, and so whenever I feel that way, like I feel abandoned, and when I feel abandoned, I'm like, well, damn, I guess it's just me doing everything again for myself. Like, I'm left here to deal with not only my feelings and my experience, but with whatever mess you left me to clean up. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Heavy.
Yeah.
There's such a density to resentment, which I find really interesting because I almost feel like it's like pebbles that are pretty dense themselves, but they're small, so they're kind of almost unnoticeable. And it's just pebbles getting tossed into this pond. And it's like, yeah, it's a little pebble, but they collect, and they get really weighted down there. And they can kind of collect for us. Like, do you have a place in your body where you feel resentment? Like, is there a specific place in your body?
I really think it's like my face and my
Mm,
ears, like they get hot. They get
interesting.
red. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I'm trying to think of the astrology behind that because that's Aries, but you
Oh,
have Aries in your fifth, sixth house. So
it's
that's
good that you know that.
almost like it's my job. Yeah, so that's your like creative passions, your space to be a mother, and then also your routines where your time goes in a day. But then that's also that Aries energy of it being in your head.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting. That's something to think about. Like
Yeah.
Aries, we're going to talk about anger in our next episode, which is very much a little bit more Aries coded. But I thought it was really valuable for us to sit with the dichotomy between, resentment and anger, as resentment being Scorpio and Aries being anger, because, we were kind of thinking of conceptualizing, resentment where, you know, like resentment is the opposite of grief. If grief is love with nowhere to go, resentment is anger with nowhere to go. And so for me, I feel my anger in my gut. I feel it in my belly button all the way to my uterus. And, I've got to illness that is very much tied, I think, together with my resentment, because of my unmet needs that weren't getting met when I was a teenager, and how abandoned as well I felt as a teenager. And I definitely see a big connection with my, endometriosis and my chronic illnesses, and how they tie in with the fact that I have just this like pond full of rocks at the bottom that are just so heavy, and I'm holding on to them and I have not put them anywhere. And so I think it's really important to think about, like, you know, listener, like, where does your resentment live in your body? What does it look like to you? Like, if Stevie, it's like a volcano, tornado, thunderstorm. And for me, it's this like dense ball that has this gravitational pull that takes up all of my space. Like, that's how we can see our anger. That's where we feel it in our bodies. Like, I really encourage you to think about, like, what does that look like for you, and where do you feel it in your body? And um, do you want to talk a little bit about, being able to visualize your anger as a part of you, like how you were talking to me earlier?
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. So many things are just like flooding in my head right now. But I have recently just felt very inspired by watching Inside Out 2 and Inside Out 1. um, yeah, I'm thinking a lot more about like approaching or visualizing our different emotions as their own entities, like their own kinds of little characters that are within us, but they are not fully us. And things that we can kind of like detach from. And like, I don't know, I just get this visual of like taking it out of our bodies and just like putting it on a chair and like having a chat with it. Um, all of that stuff. But yeah, I wanted to offer, I guess, some just like reflections or even like journal prompts in terms of, yeah, thinking about your emotions in this way. And I guess for the sake of this episode, yeah, resentment. So I'm going to name some and take it or leave it, whatever. So Luna's like crying. Y'all might hear Luna, the dog, cry because her human left.
As
And
dogs do when their person's gone.
yes, she left. She's having a good time. But Luna is here and oh, she just plopped next to me. Okay, anywho, enough about you, Luna. So if your resentment was a character, what would it look like? How would your resentment speak to you? Like, what kind of tone do they use? Like, what kind of energy is behind it? Are they, coming at you with racing thoughts or like just brooding energy? What does your resentment do when it wants your attention? What does your, I guess, like, what, no, 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 not what, how, how has your resentment supported you or protected you? Sometimes our resentment comes up because like we feel wronged, and that sense of resentment is us almost affirming ourselves or validating our experience. Like, no, that was wrong. They shouldn't have treated you that way. They shouldn't leave you to XYZ, or they shouldn't, whatever, just reaffirming whatever your experience is because you have been hurt in some way. And maybe the folks around you are not really acknowledging that experience. Um, how do you speak to your resentment? Do you kind of fold under it? Do you succumb to it? Do you ignore it? How are you talking to it? How are you communicating with it? And what support does your resentment need from you? And how do you envision your relationship with resentment evolving? What do you want to change? Do you want there to be an imbalance? Do you want it to be equal? Do you want to be the one kind of taking the lead, not ignoring it, but just taking their hand and walking over to get some ice cream after a big cry? How would you like to relate to it and build a relationship with it? So yeah, some things to think about, some things to potentially write about too. Yeah.
Yeah, I really wanted to include that because I think that when we talk about resentment being anger with nowhere to go, there are so many consequences for us not managing and honoring our resentment because um, there's been a conversation happening in the wellness space recently where people have been talking about how there's kind of linkages in studies now between anger, unexpressed anger, and how that can lead to autoimmune diseases. And they're talking about it specifically in women. And you know, that has sparked a lot of conversations that I've seen online about, women who are in marriages, in families where they are not getting their emotional needs met, their husbands are incompetent, and they've gone past the anger and they're just at a disappointment stage. And it's just kind of like, well, you can be past it, but that doesn't mean the anger is gone, like the anger goes somewhere. So it's like, well, where does the anger go? And, the answer to that is it can bleed out into your relationship with, if you have a daughter, it can bleed out with your relationships to, your children, to, other family members, your friends. It can bleed out into an autoimmune disease, and in my case, for me, my resentment is very much attached to my endometriosis. And so, it is really important to hold space and shape for your resentment because ultimately it does have to go somewhere. And I wanted to share a little bit. I have an energy worker that I work with. Her name is Sarah. I'm going to go ahead and link her in the show notes. I highly recommend checking out her work. I really, really love the way that she thinks about things. But I was going through some energy sessions with her when I was in 2021 and I was in a really transitory stage in my life and I had felt very resentful of the fact that my friends, especially people who I'm not friends with anymore, like just the way that people's lives could just kind of go on, versus my life had completely imploded and like I was building from scratch. And I was building from scratch alone in a pandemic in a city that I didn't know anybody. And I felt very resentful of the fact that my peers didn't have to go through that. And so I was working with her and I was like, hey, like I have all these emotions and a lot of it is resentment. I was like, I can tell that it needs to go somewhere, but I'm just my habit, what I've been doing this whole time is holding it in my body, and especially in my gut, and in my uterus area. And so she was like, she took me, through a visualization and she was like, okay, now I want you to imagine like a field in your belly button. And I'm a real woo person. That really did not scare me at all. I'm very comfortable imagining a field in my belly button. I don't really question that at all. And so she was like, imagine a field. It's a grassy field. There's blue skies, but there's nothing else there. And she was like, okay, now take the first piece of resentment and I want you to imagine it as a plant. And I want you to plant it. Like watch yourself dig up the dirt, plant the plant, cover it up, and watch yourself tending to this plant, watering this plant, nurturing this plant, nourishing this plant, and watch this plant grow. And this plant is your resentment. Like, give it a place, tend to it, watch it grow. Like, and I felt so much peace from that because it finally gave me this tool of like acceptance around my resentment. Like, yes, I can't change the fact that I'm going through this really tough thing by myself. And then I feel like nobody around me can relate to that. And none of my friends can understand what I'm going through and empathize. And nobody can be here with me through this hard thing that I'm going through. But like, I don't have to like let this emotion fester untreated, unprocessed in my body. I have somewhere I can put it and I can put it somewhere where it's meant to be and it can thrive. And it felt like what Stevie was saying was almost taking it outside and sitting it on a chair, and talking to it. Like for me, that was what that field metaphor was. And like, so many of the things that I have planted in this field are all kind of like black sunflowers. That's kind of the visual that I always go to. And so I have this just like black field of flowers, that I like it changed my relationship to my resentment where it became something that instead of fearing it, instead of avoiding it, instead of feeling shame around the way that it would leach out into my life, I could watch it grow and I could watch it thrive kind of in an environment where it was meant to be. And yes, all of this is in my head. Yes, all of this is an imaginative exercise, but like our mind is like the driver of our body, like our mind is the person sitting in the driver's seat of the car that is our body. So it's like it makes a lot of sense that an exercise that exists, as a visual exercise in your mind, like can have significant impact on your emotions and your relationship to your emotions in your body. And so the reason I bring up this car metaphor is because Scorpio energy is associated with like Mars. It's in the traditional system, Scorpio is ruled by Mars and it is the nocturnal ruler. It's nocturnal Mars. So specifically like underneath the anger, underneath like what is underneath our overlying emotions, right? And so um Mars is the planet that rules the energy we bring to everything that we do, what drives us, what, inspires us to take action. And the way that we take action, how we approach that, our relationship to that, all that stuff is very Mars. And so, if I'm saying that the mind is our car, is our body's like driver, and then the body is like the car that gets us where we're trying to go, like that's very much like Scorpio is like, what is the underlying things that are influencing that driver? And how can you use the power of your mind to then influence the car to run where you want it to go? And to give yourself more agency and not let your emotions rule you. And instead, you have agency over what you do with those emotions, what emotions you choose to input in addition to the emotions you don't really have a choice, they're happening anyway. And so for me, planting this, imaginary field and watching over the years, because it's been about 3 years since I've done this just giant field full of flowers, that I get to go to whenever I want to, and I get to spend, any time there that I want. And it's something that has cultivated a really beautiful personal relationship with myself that I really encourage, like, what form of that is like a good fit for you. And I think a good place to start when thinking about, if you have some astrological proficiency, a good place to start when thinking about that is your fourth house. And so what is your fourth house sign? And then in turn, how does that translate to your relationship to like what that imagery would look like for you? So it could be like a big furnace and you take your resentment, you throw it in the furnace and you watch the furnace explode and like and then come back down, like so it could really be like anything. Just, I have a Taurus fourth house, which is why mine is giving field and planting and watching a garden grow. Like that's very fourth house Taurus. So that's a good place to look if you want to look for where you can channel that energy and where it can go. So I think it's really good to answer those questions. You can also pull some tarot about it, but definitely like give yourself some space to figure out what is the pathway for your resentment to go, because uh, it'll go somewhere. Whether you do something actively or not, it's going somewhere, and it makes more sense to build systems that accommodate it as opposed to letting it take over your life.
Wow. Big brain.
Thank you. That's all credit to Sarah. That is definitely that changed my life. That was really because I used to be super consumed with resentment, and now I feel every day I feel like it's easier and easier to let go of the things that I was so resentful of because I have mechanisms for that. So
Man,
yeah,
yeah. Shout out. Always a shout out.
shout out Sarah. We stand.
Yeah. Wow. Wow, wow, wow.
Yeah.
You said it was the fourth house?
Yes, the fourth house. So for you, that is Pisces.
Oh,
Yeah.
I never connect with my Pisces placement.
Yeah, you sure don't. Yeah. I think
I
you can think of it as like maybe an atmosphere. So like a
mm,
dissolving kind of vibe might be a good imagery to think about.
interesting. Yeah. Wow. I
Yeah.
really look at me learning.
Yeah. I'm proud of you.
Yeah, maybe we could talk about that in our next like
Yes,
one-on-one joint reading.
happily. I was gonna say if anybody's curious about what that looks like for them, you can feel free to book. I think a drag me reading would be a good fit, and then just write in the description. I'm from the podcast, what's my fourth house? How do I channel my resentment? What does that look like? And we can build that out together.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah. Did you want to talk about like, the feeling of resentment underneath that being underappreciated or anything like that? Did you have anything you wanted to say about that?
Yeah. Um, sorry, Luna is just like she's walking. She is embodying resentment right
Yeah, I
now.
was gonna say.
She is like walking around, like sitting down, getting up, and like as she's walking, she's like huffing and puffing and like crying and going like like she just did that. We also believe that Luna is like a reincarnation of like my spouse and his sister's maternal grandma. So it's just
Yeah, I could totally see that. Real
It's really
disgruntled
giving.
grandma.
She's so disgruntled. She's
Oh.
wagging her little tail. Luna. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna bring up Luna into the frame for
Yeah.
anybody who is come here watching on YouTube.
Oh, Luna. Luna's like cut out.
She's like
She's
she
over it.
wants to be held, but then like also does not know how to be held.
Oh, she's so cute.
Hi, crazy goose. Mwah.
She's so cute.
Hi, Luna. I love you. She's silly. She's silly. She's silly. Okay. In terms of abandonment, no, I think I was I kind of brought it up in like, yeah, right?
Okay. Yeah, I think so. I think maybe the last thing we can say is another good question to kind of end on talking about this is, what is the story that you're telling yourself about your resentment?
Mhm.
And I think it's really important to allow your resentment to point to what are the needs that are being unmet for you. And, you know, once you feel the feeling of resentment, find a place for it to flow and to go somewhere and to do something with it. You can use that resentment as fuel in your car to take you in the direction of trying to meet those needs yourself, or reaching out to community and building those community and self supports to meet those unmet needs and release that resentment. And um, it's important when we are thinking about the story we're telling ourselves about our resentment, a lot of times we can position ourselves as like the unquestionable sole victim in our resentment. And I always bring this up in so many episodes, but we are in a care shortage. And what Stevie had mentioned earlier about resentment being these unmet needs and feeling abandonment when those needs couldn't be met and that resentment comes up is, understanding that we are all in a care shortage together, that there is a deficit of care to go around for everybody. And everybody is coping with their unmet needs very differently. And so when you're thinking of yourself as like the sole victim in your story, which I think resentment can often cloud our judgment and make us feel like that, to understand that yes, like your pain, your suffering is super valid, and to really like sit in that, but then also understand that there are ways that you can support yourself. And there are ways that you can seek that support out in community spaces. And that you won't be able to find what those things look like if you stay in the story that like all of this is happening to you 100%. And so I'm not saying to go in the other extreme of like the victim blaming and the, invalidating your situation, but it is important to kind of understand that in the story that you're telling yourself about your resentment, there is more than one story. And so try to look for some other angles and positions of the story. And so just kind of to be a little bit open to that during this season. So we'll leave you with that. And you want to get into some tarot, some horoscope?
Yeah, this is honestly pretty perfect. Everything that you just said. Um, wow, I just love that when that works. I pulled three cards for y'all using the Marigold deck. Yeah, we're gonna link that, but I feel like
We have
if
to
you've been
stand.
around the block, you should know.
We're big fans of that deck.
Yeah.
It's perfect for
Uh,
this vibe, this resentment vibe.
seriously, this deck is so like everything's a skeleton and I love it. Okay, this first card is the Hanged Man reverse. Hooray.
Love him.
Yeah, he's he's doing what he has to do. Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about like what the Hangman means upright to start off. So this card usually it invites us to hold off, like on making a decision or taking the next step in whatever the heck you're planning on doing because it wants you to look at the situation, in this case, resentment, from a different perspective, or even do something completely different than you normally would. If you're normally kind of steeping in that resentment, I don't know, try something different or be curious about trying something different. At the very least, be curious. In general, this card is like something needs to pause, something needs to stop. Either it's intentional, like noticing, like, okay, this is the momentum at which I am moving and I would like to stop, or it's going to be abrupt and it's just going to happen to you. The choice is yours. Sometimes it's not, but in this case, let's say it's yours. So, this is especially true when you're feeling stuck in the same pattern or in the same situation. Again, what are these narratives that your resentment is weaving? Like, what is this? Yeah, the story that you're holding on to. But when it's in the reverse, it's the pause is needed. Like it's still there. Like you still need to pause, and it's acknowledging some resistance. Yeah, resistance. And I don't want to label emotions as good or bad or anything because they just are. They just exist. And they're information. So resistance can tell us that we are getting close to something really tender. And it's information, again, for us to be curious about and to not meet with judgment. And it lets us know that maybe we actually are not feeling safe enough to go any further. Like the resistance, this wall, like it's there for a reason, and it's not something that we mm, not something that would be helpful to try to like bulldoze over or destroy or to push past. Like it is there for you to actually stop. Like it is there for a reason. Like you need to stop and take a look around you. Check in with your body, check in with what thoughts or feelings are coming up for you, or even like how resentment is showing up in your relationships that maybe, I don't know, maybe you don't want to admit because of what it means for that like experience to be real and what that means for your relationship to yourself or relationship with other people or the kinds of like habits you have. So I hope this is still making sense because I feel like I'm blacking out. um, yeah. So yeah, check in with your sense of safety because that is important. Like you cannot, I guess, go through life and all of those things and all of these like really deep things that we are asking you and inviting you to explore. Your safety matters. Like you need to feel that sense of safety in order to be vulnerable or to, yeah, these are very vulnerable things. And I want to honor that. So, again, when is your resistance showing up? And what do you do with it? Do you slow down? Do you check in with yourself? Do you go to your little, belly button garden of resentment? Do you go to the top of a volcano? Like, where do you go? Or are you just moving forward, business as usual, because you have goals, you have things to do, responsibilities to take care of, which are also real. They matter. Yeah. So if you're feeling stuck, either like you've hit a roadblock or you've hit a wall or you just feel like you've been feeling this for a really long time, it might be attributed to the resistance that is showing up and also inviting you to take a gander, take a peek, be with it. Whether it's, answering those journal prompts that I offered or doing a visualization that like Shroot shared. Yeah, I want to leave that there.
Yeah. Oh, that's so spot on for the astrology. It's wild. It's actually like uncanny how this happens because like listener, I want you to know that like Stevie and I don't talk about these in advance. Like Stevie pulls the tarot, Stevie like goes through that whole process themselves. I look at the astrology, that's a process I do completely by myself. Like I'm not an expert in tarot, Stevie's not an expert in astrology. We don't magically like see that we're going to be saying the same thing. So it shocks us every time. Like I hope it shocks you as much as it shocks us because it's wild. It's wild that we both wind up here. But you perfectly described the transit that we're going through right now, which is Venus in Capricorn. And Venus is going to be in Capricorn until December 7th. And so we've got, a ways to go with this Venus in Capricorn. And, Venus is the planet that has to do with relationships, and it is relationships to everything. I like to say relationships to our nouns. It's relationships to people, places, and things, as well as ourselves, as well as past versions of ourselves, future versions of ourselves, as well as things that we can't like perceive with our physical senses. So our relationship to our ancestors, our relationship to our emotions, our relationship, like all these intangible things as well as tangible things. And so, Capricorn is the sign that rules limits. It's the sign that rules resistance. It's the sign that's kind of like pressure produces a diamond is very much Capricorn vibes. Like, it's very much like, hold up, we got to figure this out. Something's not adding up. And I think what can be a little bit hard about this Venus and Capricorn transit is that it's very possible that the things that don't feel like they're adding up for you may not be an external thing. It may be something internal. And so that's where when Stevie's saying, like, pay attention to resentment, like that is really powerful because, it really is very likely that the resistance that you're experiencing is pointing to something within you that needs to be like given space and given time and really dedicated energy to. And, I think it's really powerful when you are feeling this. Like for me personally, with resentment, with resistance, I take the very air sign approach to resistance, to which the second that I feel even a little bit of resistance, I check out. Like, Stevie's talking about checking in, I'm like, oh, I check out. Like, I do the opposite of that. I'm like, I'm out of here. Like, I'm not acknowledging this at all. And so a lot of times for me, I need somebody in my life who knows me, a practitioner that I work with, sometimes a combination of all of those things, to tell me, hey, like, are you avoiding this thing? And for me to like completely fall apart in response to that because I'm totally avoiding that thing and I just like am not even giving myself space to acknowledge that I'm avoiding it. And so we did that in a reading that Stevie gave me, and Stevie was like, hey, here are the things that you're all avoiding. And I'm like, oh, okay, let me start sobbing in this reading. And Stevie and I have given each other readings for 4 years, over 4 years now, and I've never sobbed in a reading like I did in this one. And it was because that thing that I had so much resistance around, that thing that I was avoiding so badly, it just needed space. And so I really kind of want to emphasize like, the opposite of Cancer, or sorry, the opposite of Capricorn energy is Cancer energy. And so if we're feeling this resistance, then it's really important that we lean into creating space for our emotions, and especially the emotions that we don't want to feel. And it is completely okay if that's something that you can't do on your own. And if you need community support, whether that's professional, whether that's personal, platonic, etc., romantic, whatever, like whoever's supporting you through that, like understand that like you can create systems of support that you can tap into in those moments. So I had that reading schedule with Stevie because I was like, I'm missing something. Something's off. Like I just need like a little bit of guidance and support because something's not right within me. I'm like not firing on all cylinders properly. And Stevie was like, yeah, here, here, and here. And I was like, yeah, I was avoiding that. And I think about how different my experience in my body is now that I'm not avoiding those things anymore and now that I'm active about it. And I have a health coach and I went to my health coach and I was like, "Hey, these are things that I tend to avoid. Can you help me be accountable and check in with me about whether I'm feeling these things or not and working through them or not?" Then I went to my acupuncturist and I was like, "Hey, like I'm struggling with feeling these things. And these are some things that are really difficult and they're greatly affecting my life. And I'm feeling a lot of resistance around them. Can you help me with that?" And she totally helped me with that. So it's like by having these systems of support, when I run up against this resistance, I don't have to deal with it alone. I don't have to say, oh, like, this is something that's a me project, like, and I don't have to struggle. If it's something that I struggle with, I don't have to do that alone. And so I just really want to encourage you, like, some people they do prefer to do it alone. It is a solo project for them. They're like, I'm resistant around this, I'm gonna handle it. And I really encourage that too, if that's what's right for you. But if you're one of those people that like me, where it's like if you check out when you feel resistance, then I do encourage you to build systems of accountability, and to trust that, you do have people who care about you and can hold that space for you to just like process your feelings and just feel the things that you are avoiding feeling. And so I think that the kind of counterweight antidote to this Venus and Capricorn, this hangman in reverse energy, is to just be in that space with your feelings, to carve out some time and space to really sit with those feelings, whether you have to do that alone or with other people, and to see what those feelings have to teach you about where you're at, and to really be open to that. Your resistance can be a guide, so allow it to be a guide.
Seriously. What stood out to me when you were talking is that you were sharing this resentment with people you felt safe with.
Yeah.
Again, that safety, the sense of safety is so important because
Mm.
resentment, it's so much and so all encompassing because it is like trying to protect you.
Yeah.
Like it is this, or can be a ferocious thing that just is like, you get to the back. I'm going to take
Mhm.
over.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to speak to the manager
Yeah.
kind of situation. But yeah, I think that really speaks to the importance of like finding spaces where you feel safe enough to be vulnerable to share that the the experience of being resentful or feeling resentment and tapping into your resources of yeah creating space for it, embodying it, feeling it, transmuting it, and god dang.
And I think that really speaks to the value of having these systems in advance. So, we are always out here telling y'all, hey, build out a community support system. Um, and it's something that you can draw on in these times where I didn't have to form a new relationship with all these people. These were all people that I had been in relationship to. And so it was not hard for me to draw on these sources of support when I was like, something is wrong and I need to like solve this. And like it was a lot easier for me to go through this really difficult thing, to feel these really heavy and painful emotions because I had that pre-existing support. So this is a good season to either draw on your pre-existing support or understand that like you need some. And it's a great time to start. Put yourself out there and lay those foundations for building your support system.
And these things take time. These relationships, they take time to nourish. Your relationship with yourself takes time to nourish and to evolve. And I think when we are presenting emotions or experiences in this way, we're never like going in with the expectation that you have everything healed before our next episode.
Yep.
Yeah. So these are just seeds that we're planting.
The
And
doors were opening.
yeah. And yeah, we're very excited to, I guess, see what grows from this, see what comes out of it. But yeah, 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 yeah. All these
Love it.
things, all these freaking things. Okay, cool. Any last astro bits for this
No.
card? No? Okay. Gorgeous, beautiful. Another perfect transition into this. We have the Magician reversed.
Ooh, juicy.
Cute. I know. Okay. So upright again, this card is like a manifestation card. It tells you that you have like all the tools and resources that can help you manifest whatever it is you're trying to bring into your life. Um, like you have all of these different skill sets, these tools, these resources, these people that you can draw from and put together so that you can create change, make magic happen, alchemy, and upright, it invites you to move forward once you have like a really good sense of clarity in your intentions and your goals, and you're focusing on one thing at a time, which as someone with ADHD, that feels really hard. But we're not talking about the upright version anyway. We're talking about the reverse. um, okay, in the reverse, the magician signifies the desire to create something or to manifest something. Like the desire is there, like you want to do it, you want this to happen. And again, there's a roadblock or there's some resistance in taking the tangible steps to make the change happen. Perhaps maybe you don't trust yourself to have, like, maybe you don't trust that you actually have everything you need to do something. Maybe you're still waiting for the conditions to be like just right in order for you to take one step. I get it. That's me. I'm really like reading myself. Um, yeah, I'm curious because I feel like there's this essence of resistance again happening. Like you are resisting change or resisting taking a step. And again, not saying this in a shameful way or like a judgmental way at all, because this resentment is information. It is telling us that something needs a little tending needs a need to be met or needs care in some way. So I can imagine in like wanting to create things, some different thoughts might come up. Like maybe you're doubting your own intelligence, especially if you are going to be perceived by other people. Maybe you are doubting your own capacity to carry something out or to create something. Maybe you feel like you don't actually deserve it or that this thing is for other people. Other people get to live out your wildest dreams, but you don't because it's you. Ah, that makes me so sad. Um, because I want you to have good things. I want you to be able to live a life with no regrets. Maybe there's this sense of lack, like you are lacking something, which is really an interesting contrast to the card that's saying like you actually do have everything. It's just a matter of how you make sense of it and how you put it together to the best of your ability. It doesn't have to be like, I have all these things, therefore I should see an immediate desired outcome like tomorrow. Again, these things take time. They take so much time. So yeah, this is just another invitation to take a look at your resistance, especially when it's tied to resentment. Like if this thing that you're feeling stuck in, this desire to change your situation as it's tied to resentment, maybe you're like you do want things to change. You want your relationships to change. You want your relationship with your emotions to change, but this is all you've known for a really long time. And whether or not it feels good, it's something you're familiar with and comfortable with and know how to like white knuckle through the next day and the next day and the next day. Um, so kind of what you were saying, Shroot, like if you're not seeing the changes, maybe it is something within you that needs to be explored. Um, yeah, yeah. What do you think?
Oh, this is such a doozy of a transit. Like, it makes so much sense that this card is the representation of that. But the transit we're kind of experiencing, we're in the middle of it, and we're just going to be in the thick of it for November, December, and then it's going to fade in intensity, and then it's going to come back in April. It is the Mars-Pluto opposition. And again, I want to direct us, in the traditional system of astrology, Mars rules Scorpio. In the modern system of astrology, Pluto rules Scorpio. So this is a Scorpio on Scorpio opposition. Um, and that produces a lot of tension. And if I'm saying Mars is the planet that rules our energy that we bring to everything that we do, it's the planet that rules fucking and fighting, is how I like to say it. It's the planet that rules our aggression, our drive, our passions, our that kind of intensity of energy is very much Mars driven. Now, Pluto, on the other hand, rules our buried wounds. It rules especially of the matrilineal variety and matrilineal on both sides of the family. It is the wounds that are buried by society, by our family lineage stories, by, wherever it's buried. Um, and they are still affecting us to this day. They are still ruling the way that we live our lives. They are still clouding our judgment. shaping the way that we relate to other people, relate to ourselves. They are kind of it's like a Pluto tinted lens instead of a rose tinted lens. It's a Pluto tinted lens on the way that we see everything. And so it's really important to examine our relationship to our buried wounds and to be present when they do come up. Um, and so essentially, Pluto transits are an opportunity for these buried wounds to come up and either re-trigger us, re-traumatize us, or they're an opportunity for us to heal them, to acknowledge them, to heal them, to create that space for flow, movement, and to release the hold that they have on us. And so Mars opposite Pluto is giving we want to take action and we maybe like, this could really come up for people who like me, if you're like me and you use being productive to cover up your discomfort. Productivity is a way to soothe your wounds. And maybe that's a story you inherited from your family like I did. And so like we will feel this incredible burst to be super productive during this transit. And we will feel really stuck of like, I want to get work done, but I can't. Like, what's the problem? And we'll have all the stories that we have in our head for whatever reason that problem is. But in reality, it is a wound that we are not attending to that is coming up, and we are trying to stuff it back down with productivity. And so, or, it could be the flip side of that, of like, your wound could leave you unable to move in a frozen state. And you could be really beating yourself up about the fact that you have so much to do and you're not getting any of it done. Um, and you still feel stuck and you're like, I'm the problem. I'm horrible and that's why I'm not getting anything done. When in reality, again, it is a buried wound that needs your attention. And so this transit is kind of here to teach us the reason it's lasting so long and the reason that it's not going away anytime soon is, and to why Stevie keeps saying this is going to take time, is because we're having a Mars retrograde. And so we are in phase one of Mars retrograde, which is before the retrograde happens, but the Mars is in the like area of the sky where it will retrograde. And so that it's activated, it's charged. This energy of Mars energy is very charged. And Pluto is in its last few degree of Capricorn, where it's been since 2008. And so um, basically, Pluto is going to move into Aquarius for good on the, what is it? November 19th. And um, Mars is going to move, like Mars has already moved into Leo November 3rd, I think it is. Yeah, November 3rd. So it's like this opposition started while Mars was in Cancer and Pluto was in Capricorn, but it's going to continue because both of these planets are moving into their next sign. And then Mars is going to go back up, back over that opposition with Pluto into Cancer, and then come back forward. And that's why we're going to feel it again in April because it's going to be coming back forward, back into the opposition with Aquarius, or back into opposition with Pluto and Aquarius. So all that to say, like, this is going to take time. And this is only phase one of experiencing this, and that November, December is going to be super activated because that's when the retrograde happens. And so then we'll have phase three chapter closing in April. And so really like the best, you can do in this phase one is just try to notice, what are you using? What actions are you taking to cover up your buried wounds? And is there a way that you can take actions to give space to your buried wounds as opposed to trying to cover them up? Can you lean into the opposite of the inclination that you're trying to do? So if you are like me and you like to use productivity as a way to cover up your wounds, is there a way you can find some stillness in a moment? So one thing I like to do is I have a weekly co-working session with a friend of mine because we're both business owners. It's really nice to work with somebody. And we're both neurodivergent, like we use each other as body doubling. And so a lot of times in these sessions, yeah, we work on our businesses, but if there's something that we don't want to do and we're avoiding it, we try to do it in these sessions as mutual accountability. So if I'm saying I want to use productivity to cover up whatever wound, instead I'm going to open that session and be like, hey, could we do this guided meditation that will just hold some space for my wound? I can't do this alone. Like I'm avoiding it. So can we do it together and then we start co-working? And my friend is always down. Like, so allowing like myself to be supported in doing the opposite of what I'm trying to do. Whereas if you're feeling frozen and you're feeling like you can't get anything done, is there a way that you can move your body? And is there a way that you can put on like a YouTube video of something, a movement practice, and like do that. Or again, find an accountability buddy for that and like go to the gym together or, like just, or even taking a walk, right? Just go taking a walk, touch some grass. Like, is there any way that you can drop into your physical body, which is the opposite of kind of staying frozen in that like panic state? So, really try to see what actions you can take to like direct your energy of that buried wound into like action. And that way it's kind of like you'll have a much easier time as this transit goes on because you will have a practice of letting these buried wounds come up and flow through your actions as opposed to stuffing them back down and then you spend the whole transit in a war between your wounds and your actions trying to stuff that wound down. So learning to work with your wounds as opposed to against them is like a key lesson for this transit. To be really open to that.
I'm cheesing because it just goes right into the next dang card.
That's perfect. We kind of nailed it this time.
I know, god
Very
dang.
flow.
Okay. Our last card. This card always clocks me. It's Two of Wands. I think these
Lord,
are sorrow. I can't tell, but
you think they're what?
sorrow, but I can't tell.
Oh,
Sorrow
yeah,
mustard?
that'd be cool.
That would be cute. Okay. Any hoosers. Okay. Two of Wands. This one's upright. So, hooray.
Love a happy ending.
No. Okay. We have talked so much about just how much time this takes. And I would like to say that just because it takes time does not mean that you have to wait to do things. Again, it's like this thing of trying to wait for the environment and the conditions to be just right in order for you to take a step or to like take an action. You don't. The environment, the conditions become right because you are actively working alongside with it to do things a little differently, to make a choice. I know I talk about choices a lot, and I guess my intention is to remind you that you do have a choice in maybe not everything, but there are definitely some things that you have a choice in. Gosh, what is the serenity prayer from like 12 step? Grant me the
Mhm.
serenity to accept the things that I cannot change and
Change
to
the
choose
things I
the
cannot
things
accept.
that I can and the wisdom to know the difference.
Yep.
Um, I haven't thought about that prayer in so long. Remember, part of my lore is that I used to be a substance use counselor. So these 12 step sayings, they might come up. They might come up. I do slip them in sometimes, not just like, I don't know. If you know, you know. And if you don't, sorry. Maybe good for you. Uh, Either way. So Two of Wands. Um, this card is about choices, two different choices, two different paths. So as you are working out the how you're going to do these things, or, just spending the time that we have talked about in being with your resentment and creating a plan, like creating the structures and the systems that Shroot talks about too, after you've taken this time to be with yourself and maybe even to like talk about this with other people, the people in our system, our friends, our safe people, our um, care team, our guides. After we have done all of that, we invite you to envision what kinds of changes you would like to see, which I think was a one of the questions that I had listed earlier. Like, what do you envision your relationship with resentment to look like? What are the changes that you want to see? What role do you want to play in this relationship with resentment? And yeah, take some time, think about it, envision it, manifest it. Um, I There was some sassy part in my brain just now being like, think about all the times you envisioned how your relationship with your ex could be, and it never was. Like it never worked out the way you wanted. probably because it wasn't meant to work out the way you wanted. Um, Anywho, maybe that's for someone, maybe it's not, but it was definitely for me. So this is like the action plan now. Like, what are the steps that you can take on this journey so that like this doesn't just stay a lofty goal that you're like loosely working towards. It's actually something you want. Like it is a goal and you are approaching it the way that you approach all your other goals that you work so hard on and prioritize over the stillness, over, everything else that's kind of getting pent up. Yeah, there's a decision that you got to make again. There's so many decisions. I feel you and I affirm you if you have decision fatigue, because I do too. Um, yeah. So with this card, think about it. Are you going to stick with all the rivers and the lakes that you're used to? Or are you going to take a risk and try something new? Choose something new, something different most of the time, every time until you, I don't know, find a waterfall or whatever the heck. Okay, that's me. I had to do it.
I love it. Maybe you have to chase some waterfalls. Like, oh, I love it. Yeah. Oh my gosh. This is like the perfect embodiment of the transition from Scorpio to Sagittarius energy, where, Scorpio energy is very much like weighted down by the density of these buried things, this resentment, this grief, this loss, this anger, feeling stuck in these things is very much Scorpio. Scorpio's like, I have to be a master at these things. I need to be obsessed with these things. And that's what's going to cultivate safety. And Sagittarius is like, but what if you burn all of it down and use the light from this fire to lead your way forward? What if you did that anyway? And one thing that I love about Sagittarius energy, and if you hear me saying this and you know me, especially me before I was an astrologer, you would know that I hated Sagittarius energy. Sagittarius energy was my enemy. Like, so me sitting here and saying that, like, that's growth because, you know, I used to hate Sagittarius energy because I was in my little Scorpio bag and I always felt like Sagittarius people to me came across as callous or, they came across as almost like superficial or flighty or flaky or, that kind of thing. And in that part of my life, like I really needed like people to depend on and I really needed to feel like I could depend on XYZ. And I never really felt that with Sagittarius energy. It felt very like I couldn't depend on it and that stressed me out. And when I was in that transitory phase in around 2021, I mean, I had already kind of thought about it earlier, but it really cemented in my mind of like, oh, like I'm in a new space. I'm in a completely new dimension. I'm in a new city. I'm in a new job that I've built for myself. I'm in a new dimension with my relationship with my illness to the point where I can't use my arms. I couldn't raise my arms above my shoulders at the time. Um, like I was in a completely just new place all around. And when I was thinking about how I got there and who brought me there, ultimately, every single door that opened that brought me somewhere new that was incredible and sometimes horrible, but led me in the direction that I was meant to go in, it was a Sagittarius that brought me there. Every single time on the threshold of total life transformation, it was a Sagittarius who ushered me through the door. And I was like, how can I be a hater? How can I have anything but gratitude for the fact that Sagittarius people are courageous enough to not only walk through the door themselves, but to prop it open for us to follow? Like, come on. I gotta give it to them. So, if you're a Sag, I extend my gratitude to all of the unnamed work that you guys do because you're burning so bright and you're blazing your trail so bright for all of us fearful Scorpio dominant people to follow. So, I think that, this card is a perfect representation of that transition between Sag to Scorpio. And, I want to name during this Sag season, um, it's just an opportunity for, this idea that if you wait for your to be ready before you take the leap, you'll never leap. Like, you know, anybody who's ever done anything, especially done anything outside of their comfort zone, unfamiliar to them, scary to them, you have to leave. Like there is no readiness to leave. I mean, you can get yourself as ready as you can, but there's never going to be a time, and this is especially for my Geminis. If you're a Gemini and you got Gemini placements and you're listening, there's never going to be a time where you have enough information, when you have enough sense of safety. There is never going to reach that point of enoughness. So while I do definitely underscore that you have to take the realities of capitalism into account. So I'm not out here being like, quit your job with no backup plan. Like, definitely take into account your realities and your limitations, but also understand that like there is an element of risk involved when you do something new and when you do something unfamiliar, and that you cannot be 100% prepared for that risk. You can do the best you can, and ultimately you got to build the plane while you're flying it. So I feel like a good example of that is me and Stevie with this podcast. Neither of us have done a podcast before. I may have some video editing, some production experience, but like we did not know what we were doing at all. And we just said, hey, like let's do it, and we came up with the idea in February, and we put out our first episode in June. And God willing, knock on wood, we're going strong. And we're learning so much along the way, and it has been a undertaking and an ordeal for us. But at the same time, we're reaching hundreds of you. And we're reaching people all over the world. We never thought that that was even possible. We just assumed that our friends would listen to this, like we did not have any hopes for what this was going to be. And so, you know, we would not have found how incredible this experience could have been had we not leaped. And it was definitely that Sagittarian energy that I embodied when I said, hey, Stevie, we're doing this. Come with me. Like, if you can pin this in your schedule, then let's make it happen. We'll figure it out along the way. And so it is really good to plan, but also remember that there is going to be a moment where you're going to have to leap, and there isn't a perfect moment. You just have to leap anyway. And so to really summon that strength, you can look to where is the Sagittarius section of your chart. And understand that that house that Sagittarius is in, you can look up the meaning. So let's say you have Sagittarius in your third house, right? Then you want to look up the meaning of the third house. And you want to say, I derive my faith in my ability to take this leap and move forward because I have the faith that I can build this plane while I'm flying it in this sector of my life. Um, and really draw on that because we all have Sagittarius energy in our chart. We can all access that Sagittarius energy if we have placements or not. So obviously Sagittarius people don't need to hear this. But if you don't have Sagittarius placements or you have really traumatized Sagittarius placements, then just understand that it can be a reservoir for this light that you can use to burn your way forward and to charge into this unknown. And to have faith that, yeah, it may not all go right. In fact, it may go horribly wrong. I can tell you when I burned my life down, it went horribly wrong. Like, but ultimately, the things that you learn, and the way that you grow and expand as a person in response to that is immeasurably valuable. And so, Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. And Jupiter is the planet that rules wisdom. And I always say, wisdom is knowledge plus experience. And so this is a time, this Sagittarius season, go get some experience, bring your knowledge and go get some experience. So we're going to be having an opposition between Jupiter and Gemini and Sagittarius Sun. When is that opposition? It's a great question. December 7th. And around that time, in like the weeks leading up and in the weeks after, like, you know, bring that knowledge with you and leap. It's a great time to leap. So really just cultivate that faith in yourself. And, again, lean on people who have faith in you. And if you've got any Sagittarius people in your life, you can be like, hey, could you prop the door open for me a little bit? I'm scared. And let them lead you through. So I'll end there.
I wanted to name also just thank you. Thank you for everything. Um, yeah, with every risk we take and with every decision we make, there is always a loss. There is always going to be a loss. And that's going to look different depending on whatever the decision is. And I want to honor that. I want to honor that, like, maybe the resistance to change is that you want to hold something so closely and you're worried that you're going to lose it. And the reality is you might lose it.
You
And I
might have
want to
already
honor that. Huh?
you might have already lost it.
Yeah, you might have already lost it. But yeah, I think I want to pose the question of what is it that you're willing to lose in order to gain something that even now you probably could never imagine. Yeah. Okay, that's my last thought.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll leave everybody with this is a great season to be curious. Like I'm making that reframe the theme of my year of instead of fixating on what I don't know, which I love to do, I'm fixating on what I'm curious about. So, you know, you can feel the difference in your body of what it feels like to ruminate on what you don't know versus what it looks like to open yourself up to be curious, to learn and explore. So join me on that journey. Um, Thanks so much for listening, everybody. We are so thrilled to have you here. We are approaching our 6 month um podcast anniversary. So thanks so much for rocking with us. I think I mentioned it in the last episode, but we do have a special surprise cooking up for you who are our loyal listeners. We appreciate you all so much. We are going to be doing a giveaway, and it is going to be podcast exclusive. We are not posting about it on social media. So I really encourage you to keep listening if you're listening. If you have a friend who you think could really benefit from our work, this is a great opportunity to introduce them to our podcast. You know, you can let people know they don't have to start from the beginning to listen to our podcast. You can jump in at any point. We did our best, even though we're doing horoscopes, we did our best to make sure that these episodes are almost timeless and that they'll find you when you need them. So, if you feel like any of the episodes we've ever talked about, you're like, my friend needs this, like, feel free to share it with them. And, uh, stay tuned because we have a giveaway coming soon for you. And where can we find you, Stevie?
Yeah. Okay. You can find me at where can you find me? I'm coming back. I'm coming back. Okay. Yeah. You can find me on TikTok and on Instagram at cosmic dot return. Hooray. What about you, Shrew?
Yeah. You can find me on all of the social media platforms. I am at Shrew Trees. That is SHRUTREES. And you can also book a joint reading with us if you are interested in how the astrology and tarot combination is a real winning combination this time. If you want to see that magic happen for you, you specifically, whatever you're going through in this season of your life, we highly encourage you to book our joint reading, which is called Dance with Datura, where we will help you, bloom even in the dark. We will hold that space for you that we mentioned, and really give you a lot of clarity on, you know, the underbelly of whatever's going on, and with that resistance we talked about, as well as what are the practical strategies that you can employ specifically to move through, and move through from an empowered standpoint. And so, you can find the link to book that in our show notes. We also both offer our own practice readings. So Stevie does tarot and Reiki, and I am an astrologer. So you can find our links to book with us in our show notes. And I had one more thing I wanted to say, but I don't remember. So I'll let you guys know next time if I remember. But thanks so much for listening.
Yay. Bye, y'all. See you next Tuesday.
Love you.
Love you.